So, friends, in one of the previous videos, we learned that there are such situations when the head moves forward, and in this process, several such pathological positions are formed to which the vertebrae adapt. But there are also cases when lateral tilts occur. That is, this can only be during movement, or it's possible that the spine is already fixed in this position. Then there will be a violation of the posture or scoliosis. Or during movement, a person makes an asymmetrical movement, more to one side, less to the other. Then, this will typically cause pain. The muscles will develop asymmetrically on each side. The greater the difference, the more the pelvic spine will be fixated in this position. And the main muscle that forms the lateral tilt is the quadratus lumborum muscle. It is located between the 12th rib and the pelvic bone, this iliac bone. All lumbar vertebrae, transverse processes also participate for it to be able to work. This muscle attaches to all these vertebrae. And it often happens that a difference develops between the right and left muscles. On the side where the muscle will be shorter, these 2 points come closer from this side. The back part of the pelvis begins to lift upwards, and the rib cage begins to lower down. First, the pelvis moves more easily from the side where this muscle is better developed. And from the other side, the muscle begins to stretch gradually, and the shorter it becomes here, the harder it is for the muscle from the opposite side to work. Therefore, to restore these two muscles, it is necessary to combine the training of the weak, stretched muscle and stretching of the shortened muscle. There are different exercises that stretch these lateral muscles, but here, it is necessary to stretch them individually. Practically everyone knows how to train a muscle individually, but it is even more useful to know how each muscle can be stretched independently from other muscles. Because if you do standard stretching exercises, for example, tilts, where your entire side will be stretched, you will simultaneously stretch the quadratus lumborum muscle together with the latissimus muscle. And here arises a situation where, because here it has become shorter, here the scapulas always start to adjust in order to keep your eyes always at the same level. Because here, you see, because the right muscle has become shorter, the left one is longer, the rib cage itself has taken on such a form. But the right scapula will slightly lift up relative to the rib cage. It will shift over here. The muscle that lifts the scapula will lift it up. And when the muscle that lifts the scapula is always tense, well, it also kind of shortens right here. So, here it turns out that the latissimus muscle is always in such a stretched state here. And here it turns out, in this case exactly, that the latissimus muscle on the right side will be longer right here. And here, on the left side, it will be shorter. Because here, the muscle that lifts the scapula pulls it up well. And here, the muscle that lifts the scapula is not working. It doesn't work because the position itself is such that there's no need to lift the scapula. And in motion, when it's supposed to work, it just doesn't work here because this shoulder is already up. This muscle doesn't need to work, since the quadratus muscle is already strained and the shoulder is already up. And so here it gradually weakens, and here it becomes more and more shortened, overloaded, even larger in volume. And therefore, if you do the exercise, you just start to pull this side. Then, as a rule, you will start to stretch the latissimus muscle here. This part will be pulled, not this part. And here, in this case, you will need to stretch two muscles at once. Here, you will need to stretch this quadratus lumborum muscle on the right and this latissimus muscle on the left side, and strengthen the quadratus lumborum muscle here. the muscle that lifts the scapula here, stretch the muscle that lifts the scapula on the right, if necessary, and strengthen the latissimus muscle. Also, if there will be a need for this, after it levels off here. The whole difficulty is to do this in the correct sequence. You need to start with this part, that is, if you act here, this won't give any results. If we lower this scapula down, this shoulder will simply go down even more, and this will put even more strain on the neck. The scapula is lifted here to ease the work of the neck so it can at least turn somehow. That's why we need to start with this part. To understand from which side the quadratus muscle, to do something, first, you need to understand it. To understand from which side the square muscle is shortened and from which side it's longer, there are a few tests. The first of them is the tilt test. It's better to do it sitting, but you can also do it standing. When standing, ensure your pelvis remains stable and doesn't move excessively. So you stand, let your hands down along your thighs, and start pulling your hand down like this. But you put your hand slightly back here so it doesn't go forward so you don't make a forward tilt, and you pull it here, to one side. You've stretched out, for example, you've made a movement to some part of the leg. You do it in such a way that the pelvis stays in place all the time. You make a minimum of movement, and you do it to the other side, and you'll find out that it's easier to move in one direction. That is, you stretch, for example, almost to the knee bend. The movement to the other side is less voluminous. That means this is already a sign that on the side where you can stretch less, the quadratus muscle is poorly strained and does not allow you to make this movement. And here, the oblique muscle is shortened. As they make opposite movements, it also does not allow this movement to be made there. This is one version of the test, and the second one is a rotation test. Here you start to turn to one side. Also, while doing this, try not to turn your pelvis because it can compensate for your lack of spine movement. Here you start to turn like this as if you are turning yourself. While doing this, do not turn your head. Look forward. And see which way this turn will be better. You turn to one side, look at the range of motion you get, turn to the other side. Usually, on the side where the turn is worse, the scapula starts to go too far here, and you can even feel how it starts to approach the spine here, and your weight starts to shift to one leg. You can do it in front of a mirror. But usually, everyone notices that they turn better to one side, worse to the other. If, for example, I have a shortened quadratus lumborum muscle on the right side, then this turn with the right shoulder forward will be worse. At the same time, there will be such a movement, there will be a shift to the right leg here. The next is another option to determine where it is shorter, where it is longer. You look at yourself in the mirror as if from the front, right? Here are a few options. The shoulder may be lower, yes, here, on the side where this muscle is shorter. Or it can be at the same level, but here a little ahead. Suppose I have the right quadratus lumborum muscle, which is short, and one option, the shoulder will be lower, and the second option, they will be at the same level, but the right shoulder will be here, in front. It means it raised it to the same level as the left scapula, the muscle that raises the scapula. When it raises the scapula, it slightly shifts the shoulder forward. And there will be a position like this. They are at the same level, but this shoulder turns out to be here in front. The hand is as if hanging slightly here in front. And one more test. You need to look at yourself from behind. And here, when the quadratus muscle is shortened, you can see such a fold on this side. It means that the first thing you need to understand is from which side and what. We understood this with you. And we will analyze the exercise in the following videos. How to stretch, how to strain. Specifically on this topic and on the previous one, where we analyze the front-back position with you. But if you want it faster, all exercises for walking, for correcting this position, step by step, they are already available on the channel, but by subscription, by the link in the description. That means, if you want to master this faster, you can go by the link. Start doing this already. There is a complete set of exercises, starting with simple ones and ending with more complex exercises. Or wait. Possibly, we will also do all of this. But to understand, first we must define, right? So, for starters, define. And, usually, statistically, it's slightly shorter on one side and slightly longer on the other. And in the comments, write what you've determined. Which side of your quadratus lumborum muscle turned out to be shorter? Which side did it turn out to be longer? And we'll see if you measured correctly or not, because very often, it's very rare that it's short on one side and weak on the other, unless there's some kind of injury or idiopathic scoliosis. And another sign, one sign, it's more comfortable for a person to put their foot back from the side of the short muscle. That is, he stands, and from the side where his muscle is short, this leg, as a rule, is located behind. So, determine that.